Premier League just found a legal way to spend more than any league in Europe. The rules that docked Everton points and started a war with Manchester City, they're being binned. In 10 weeks, English football's era of financial fair play is dead, and what replaces it has UEFA publicly warning about, quote, an extraordinary and worrying concentration of talent. This is the squad cost ratio. It's the biggest rewrite of football's money rules in a decade, and the clubs at the top of English football are already building around it. But first, you have to understand the one it's replacing. For the last decade, English football has lived under PSR, profit and sustainability rules. The principle was simple. A club couldn't lose more than £105 million over any 3-year period. If you did, you got punished. On paper, it was designed to stop clubs spending themselves into oblivion. In practice, it did almost the opposite. Clubs hired armies of accountants. They sold their own hotels to themselves. They amortised transfer fees over 8-year contracts to bury the cost. Chelsea became famous for it, handing players like Mykhailo Mudryk an 8.5-year deal, not because anyone thought he'd still be playing in 2031, but because it spread his £80 million fee across 9 sets of accounts. PSR wasn't stopping the spending, it was creating an industry of lawyers and auditors designed to get around it. And then, in November 2023, the rules finally bit. Everton were docked 10 points, 6 after appeal. 5 months later, Nottingham Forest lost 4. For the first time, clubs were being relegated not by their results, but by their spreadsheets, and it made every owner in the league nervous. On the 21st of November 2025, the Premier League's 20 clubs met in London to vote on a replacement. The vote was close, 14 in favour, 6 against, exactly the 2/3 majority needed to pass. And the rule they passed is this. From the 2026-27 season, a Premier League club cannot spend more than 85% of its football revenue on its squad. That's wages, transfer fees, agent fees, head coach pay, all of it inside one number, divided by everything the club earns from football. The target is 85. That's the green threshold. Spend between 85 and 115%, and you pay a financial penalty called a levy. Spend over 115%, and you lose points, 6 of them automatically, plus 1 more for every £6.5 million you're over the limit. It sounds simple, it is not, because here is the catch nobody's talking about. If your club plays in Europe, in the Champions League, Europa League or Conference League, the limit isn't 85, it's 70. That's UEFA's rule. It has been since 2023, which means Manchester City, Arsenal and Liverpool, the clubs with the biggest revenues, will be playing under one set of rules at the weekend and another set on Tuesday nights. Because if you're Aston Villa, or Brighton, or Newcastle, you've just been handed a weapon. Your rivals in Madrid, Munich and Milan can spend 70% of their revenue on a squad. You can spend 85. That's a 15 percentage point head start on the highest revenue league in the world. UEFA saw this coming, and they're not happy. In March, at the Financial Times Business of Football Summit in London, UEFA's head of financial sustainability, Andrea Traverso, stood up and said this: the Premier League alone now generates a quarter of all European club revenues, with more spending power on top. This will create tensions in the market. Then he pointed to the consequence. 40% of the top value players in the world are at English clubs, but many are sitting on the bench, or even worse, in the stands. This is an extraordinary and worrying concentration of talent. Translation: the best players in the world are already stockpiled in England, and now the English clubs are getting permission to spend even more. La Liga's president, Javier Tebas, went further. He said the rules would, quote, cause more inflation and more problems. But the Premier League's chief executive, Richard Masters, has a different answer. He calls it alignment, not harmonisation, and he says the 85% limit is what keeps the league competitive. Without the extra 15%, he argues, clubs that don't qualify for Europe can never catch up to the ones that do. Manchester City stays rich, Aston Villa stays behind. So who wins? In the short term, the clubs outside Europe, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Brighton, Tottenham in a bad year. They'll have more room to spend than anyone else in world football. In the medium term, the top 6 get creative, because here's what the rules don't cover. Women's team income counts as revenue, women's team costs don't. Academy income counts, academy costs don't. stadium concerts, Taylor Swift, Beyonce, that money counts. So the clubs with the biggest stadiums, the biggest women's teams and the biggest academies will quietly inflate their revenue base without inflating their squad cost ratio. Tottenham already host more NFL games and concerts at their stadium than Premier League matches. That's not a coincidence anymore. That's a financial strategy. In the long term, and this is where the Premier League is gambling, the hope is that every owner in English football is forced to think differently, not just about spending, but about earning, about commercial partnerships, stadium expansion, US sponsors, global brand deals. The clubs that can grow revenue win. The clubs that just want to spend lose points. And in a league where the gap between the top and the bottom is already the widest in the European football, this rule locks it in even further. PSR was about how much you could lose. The squad cost ratio is about how much you can earn.